The Voice Teacher Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Voice Teacher Podcast. I am Sam Johnson here with Aimee Geddes, and we are going to talk about voice teaching. Oh my goodness.
Shocker. Voice teaching? No way.
We might keep on topic today. Yeah.
I don't know if I can do that, but I'll try.
So today we're going to be talking about our favorite exercises that we've used in the last week or two. Do you tend to get in patterns where you use like the same exercise a lot with people? Or are you not normal?
You mean other people do that too? Are you kidding? No, I find it, you know what? I've got several teachers that I'm mentoring right now. So they're observing me. And I have this one student who she's just taking off, she's so excited to start teaching. So she's watching everything I do. And it makes me more self-conscious. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm using this exercise again. Yep. Doing this one. Yep. You know what? We're going to start with that bubble again. We're going to start with the zh today but I have found that zh exercise and really making people do like an under it. Zh, because where people go wrong is they go zh and they pull off of it and they try to go, they go like throaty and they'll zzz, and they kind of go off of they get off of their teeth. So I'm always reminding people, stay on your teeth to keep it consistent, get that double resistor, that, sort of a semi-occluded type of sound, or SOVT exercises, they like to call them. Fancy words. I don't know. But yeah, that one's been really, really helpful this week. And just lately, it's been making a huge difference with helping people get more balanced, more consistent airflow and a decent amount of resistance. And also pushing up on the cheek straight from the jaw during the zh.
Even on
a lot of times, yeah, a lot of times we only do that on a bubble, right? But zh. Do it, Sam. I got to hear you do it. Like that's a normal, easy sound for you, right? And like for those of us that do it all the time, but for people who don't do it all the time, they go zzz, zzz, and they start to pull up. So when you give them this, zzz, it helps them keep that kind of schwa in there and sends it out and down.
Yeah.
That's been my
thing. That kind of goes into what I've been really obsessed with over the last few weeks. Pretty much ever since we had Ken Bozeman on the podcast, I went and reread his book, and then like some things that I've had this book for 9 years, and some things that I've read like 10 times before are finally like, this matters. And the biggest thing that stood out to me was like, are you familiar with the term turning over? Do you ever use that term?
Would it be synonymous with transition when you're going from that first formant resonance to more dominant second formant?
Pretty much, yeah. Or even if not more dominant second formant, just decoupling it from the first resonance. So decoupling the first...
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if these are the first two resonances or formants, whatever you want to call them, and then these are the first three harmonics, when you're in chest voice, it's kind of like this, where the second one is on the first harmonic, or the first formant, first resonance. And so if as you start going higher, this decouples and it's kind of in the middle of the two.
Hold your hands up higher because it's not showing all the way.
So it's like kind of in the middle of the two instead of like all the way going up to the point where it is the second formant, like to this or this one, it's a lot of times this third harmonic does get up to the second resonance, but sometimes it's just the main one that was attached to the first resonance kind of gets in the middle of them. Instead of like actually being boosted by something else. And sometimes like because formants have bandwidth, like maybe the bottom of the second formant is going to help boost some harmonic and the top of the first one's going to boost it a little bit. And so that's more of like a straddle, but it's basically just not being in love with each other anymore. They decouple and it's just a little bit different. But yeah, whenever that happens, there is that sort of sensation change, which is why I think people have used the term turning over, just like chest voice and head voice, how it just describes a sensation. There was one page in this book that he basically gave the rules of what makes something turn over versus not. Basically, you just need to wait until the feeling turns over to start opening your mouth. And underneath the place where it turns over, you want to maintain basically the exact same vocal tract shaping. So for what you're doing with a zh, if they kind of pull chest voice up, that means their larynx is probably coming up, is what I heard with your demonstration. Their larynx is coming up, and also they're getting louder with the
Right.
demonstration that you just did. And the other thing is we just cannot get louder as you approach the place where it turns over. So after it turns over, then there are other rules of like, you can start getting louder pretty successfully, and you have to start opening your mouth, or else you either flip or you start feeling like this weird tension if you give it energy, but you don't open your mouth. And so anyway, that's been really mind blowing to me. And so the times that you just did the zh, that you found more successful, I heard your vocal tract staying pretty much the same, and you backed off on the volume as you kind of went up. So the zh, there's a that kind of thing, and mine just did a little bit of a flip. I've always really struggled with semi-occluded things, with the z and the v and all of those. They haven't helped me, honestly, as much as they help some of my students.
Well, it's like I mean, I've been doing this for forever, right? And there are still things in my own voice, like I still will naturally flip. I'm still, fall prey to that lovely resistance to turnover, just like singers do if I don't pay attention to it. I mean, it's kind of one of those things. It's like old habits die hard for a reason, because probably because of the way you're built, or, whatever you've been doing. Obviously, it's leaps and bounds easier than it was 20, 30 years ago. But, it's like a conscious effort. It's kind of a use it or lose it. If you, if you get careless, you'll fall back just like anybody will.
Yeah.
But I love that how you're talking about keeping the vocal tract the same. That's probably the hardest thing for students to do, is keeping that consistent vowel and the under vowel consistent more than, I mean, the over vowel. It's kind of a new concept. I've been kind of explaining that with people this week. And like, it is mind blowing for them to be like, wait, I can change my lips and it doesn't change the sound. Like, well, as long as things going on in the back are happening correctly. And I need to read Ken's book for sure. But, I'm just going to be really honest. I love the science, but all those words sometimes they're just a lot for me to process. So I have to take very small bites. And I think there are other teachers out there that hopefully will identify with this and hopefully not judge me too harshly. But because, obviously when you're teaching, it's about getting results, but really understanding that, like you're talking about, every time you get a new light bulb, it's like, yes, okay, that it just makes you that much better. You can be that much faster. You can do those, those tiny little things that make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing with that for me is that most people who are teaching voice have a pretty good idea of what good singing sounds like. And with this, it's just giving rules of why this good singing kind of works. Like these exercises, and I'll get into like how I've actually been applying this in a second, but they've been helping mostly the people who have been studying with me for a year or two. It's not like anything that they haven't felt before. With some of them, it is. Like, honestly, with some people, it's like, wait, what? That's it. But with a lot of people, it's like, oh, I've felt that before. We've gotten that, but it's been confusing because we don't know like exactly how to get it that way every time. And if it doesn't happen, it kind of gets frustrating but I've done this so many times. Why can't I keep redoing it?
Yes.
And this has been really, really awesome because now I can just be like, oh, you just got a little louder as you approached this middle part of your voice, just a teeny, teeny bit. Or we heard the larynx raise just a teeny, teeny bit. And rather than just being like, okay, here is a full-on rule for everywhere in your voice. You can't get loud. You can't do this or whatever. It's very part of your voice dependent, I guess, because a lot of the instincts that people have that are not really useful, like getting a little bit louder or opening your mouth before you approach the middle part of your voice, which tends to make you pull, they're really, really useful after you turn over for making you not turn to flip. I found that in my voice, I got really scared of doing any of those things because it wouldn't work in one part of my range, but at another part of my range, it works really, really well. The other thing that was really interesting in the book about this stuff is that every vowel turns over at a different pitch, which is just nuts. And I mean, of course it makes sense, because if the
and it's not fair.
but at the same time, recognizing it, I think makes it really, really useful, because certain vowels
Yes.
turn over way lower than other vowels. And so you can kind of, just because people have this mental holdup of high notes being hard, you can explore what it's like to have that sensation of a turnover at a lower part of the range where there's less going on. And then those same rules kind of apply on those higher vowels, like the ah. So what I've been doing a lot, like with lower voices, I'll pull it up on this thing just because it's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So it's this page on practical vocal acoustics. This is the first edition, but it's page 124, and it has the approximate F1 locations by voice. But what's interesting is most of these turnover places are within a fourth of each other based on the voice type. So like soprano on an E vowel will probably turn over around a G3, where on a bass, it'll probably turn over around a D. You know, it's not that far away from each
So-
other.
Not this G3.
Yeah, that G3.
This G.
No, G3.
It will turn over.
It'll turn over that
on
low.
an E vowel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
And then
I
because
can hear it. Yeah.
you are so good at all of that stuff, and you were just aware of like, oh, okay, it turned over, you had no problem with it. But once you kind of got into your higher stuff, you didn't open your mouth, which made it stay kind of classical sounding. It didn't turn belty. But if you kind of are aware of that feeling of once it turns over, and then it's that and you start pressing into it and opening your mouth, versus if I don't do that and I still give it energy, I feel this weirdness. So this like it just doesn't work. And that's just the difference of opening my mouth. Or if I don't give it the energy, it does the flip. And just recognizing I have control of all of those just by these two variables has been mind-blowing.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. Now I want to try opening it up. So okay, if I start down here. Okay, I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. But it's that.
You get to that like more like
Exactly.
rather than the
Exactly. And E
Yes.
is really tricky with it, because dropping your jaw and keeping
Yes.
the E quality is just really weird. And that's where I've used more of the kind of chiaroscuro whisper stuff, where if you just whisper on an E and start opening your mouth, if it still sounds like E, it'll probably work really well when you start opening your mouth when you're actually singing. Like, try that. Yeah, yours turned into E.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like
It doesn't
E.
sound like E. And so to do that, you have to keep like the back of your tongue touching your upper molars as you open your mouth
to keep it on an
to
E.
keep it on an E. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There it is.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah. You don't want to go. Well, that's interesting you talk about that, because I've had plenty of girls singing World Burn from Mean Girls, and they have mean, and they go, it's like right up there on that. And I've actually had a lot of good success having them do it on that reflexive R, like the keep that tongue nice and high to keep it out of their throat and get that bright. But because a lot of times they want to spread it, they want to go and it's way more work. It needs to be that E.
And the retroflex
keeping that
R
tongue
is
in
really
that
cool
space
because
really
it
small.
makes this kind of super cluster of your second and third resonance. And so it gives you this really big burst. But if you're not turning over already, like it's not going to do very much, right? Like if you're already just kind of pulling up, there's going to be this massive shift. But if you're turning over really well, which is generally is easier for women, just because like all of this stuff happens a lot lower in your range. And so you're a lot more used to singing this stuff high. Whereas with most lower voices, like we spend so much time in this chestier feeling that it's really weird turning over just for the top like fifth or octave of our range when we have so much more underneath it.
Do you ever have your male students then try turning over a little sooner?
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Like
so
down
how
low.
I've been using this, like recognizing all of these things of, okay, everything just turns over at a slightly different place. Ah turns over kind of
Mhm.
highest, like for tenors at around the F sharp, and for basses at around the D,
This
which is
one?
which is where
Or this
we all
one?
kind of talk about just that first passaggio
Mhm.
happening, which is true on an
Yes.
ah vowel. Like that's where the turnover
Mm.
happens on an ah vowel, but the E happens like almost an octave under. So just recognizing that it's all
Uh-huh.
different and that for every voice it's going to be a little bit different. Once I prime someone for being aware of the sensation shift, they can kind of just do it by sensation. And then I like doing it on
Right.
fifths and on octaves just to kind of prove that if we for a lower voice, if we're doing like the A flat up to the E flat, you're probably not going to turn over on the E or the oo. And I like the oo. So it would be kind of like a
Like, okay.
ooh, not yet. Ooh, starting to. Ooh, a little more. Ooh, and already I feel it turning over on the F sharp.
Mhm.
And
Feel that.
because we've been
Yeah.
primed to hear those shifts, we like feel it ourselves. I think of like, oh, okay, there it goes over. But
Yeah.
it's because of that tonal shift happening of like suddenly it's not coupled anymore. But if you do that same one and you get a little louder, ooh versus ooh. And once you get used to that other sensation, you can get loud. Obviously, it's like Dean says all the time of leaning into the
Mhm.
sound. Ooh, but it sort of stays in that thing. And I think that I've really shied
Uh-huh.
away from a lot of this kind of lingo because it gets really close to placement. And I don't want to ask people for certain placements, but just kind of
Mm.
priming them of like, okay, there's a reason we use these terms because most people feel this. You might be like most people. If you're not, that's fine too. But let's just test if you feel something similar like this. So anyway, once you kind of get used to it just on a fifth like that, then I like doing longer slides, like a ooh. And on an ooh, you have to modify it
Ooh.
like crazy to get that kind of belty sound. It's not going to belt on an ooh.
Yeah.
And same thing
Yeah.
on an E. But if you're aware of like, okay, this is the moment that I feel it move over, then you can just couple the rest of the slide up with opening your mouth and giving a little more energy. And then suddenly it's like, oh,
Mhm.
this is what it feels like to be big in a headier kind of place. But for E and Oo, having that happen so low was just, it broke my brain.
Like, no way. Well, and it's kind of like that chart from Dean's book where it talks about like, okay, these vowels, like produces more
Mhm,
release. Ooh, E, O, and ooh, you're gonna get more release. A, you're gonna get more
mhm,
hang on. And that's kind of the simple way of saying exactly what you're just
mhm,
talking about. That these things they naturally occur. There are sounds that kind of do this for
mhm,
you. And so for a beginning teacher, it's really great for them to kind of have it in those simple terms. But I think it's fascinating as you get more advanced and as you're really thinking about these things, knowing, hey, there's like a
mhm,
specific math to this. And all I have to do is understand the rules. I tell my students this all the time too. Just learn the rules that govern the
mhm.
voice and operate within that. And you can do
Yeah,
anything. You just need to know. I don't you can flip on
yeah.
purpose if you want to,
Because you
because
don't open your mouth as much and you don't
ole.
get as much energy.
Yeah.
And it's
You just figure it out. It's like, okay, connect the dots, line them up, and
exactly. But yeah, while I was kind of experimenting with this, the same idea came to mind of like what Dean talks about of E being more of a heady vowel or more of a release and
mhm.
ah being that other way. And I really struggle with ah.
Awe is my nemesis. I had a teacher, my opera teacher back like 15 years ago, and he was great for so many things, but his exercises drove me crazy because you know what he would do? That was where I had to start
Yeah.
every time. And I'm like, I was screaming by the time I got up to, like B or C. It was kind of a nightmare to do exercises for him because he just always gave me
Mhm,
awe. And awe was so hard for me. I was like, can I do an
mhm,
E? Can you let me like E? Like on a long
mhm,
scale, like that would be really a lot more beneficial for me. But throwing that awe in there, oh my goodness. And so, like when we do the 5-tone scale assessment, we start lower, but it's because awe is so
mhm.
revealing. Awe is like you can hear everything in the voice if you do an ah, because it's not very, like you say, because it's not very conducive to turning over very
Yeah,
early.
exactly.
It wants to do it later and just wants you to hang on to everything.
Exactly. And so
And excess baggage is not good for
no,
relationships
it's not.
between vowels and consonants and scales.
When I was first learning how to do like that assessment thing, I was really kind of confused because I'm like, well, aren't we setting them up to pull chest? Like if we go to an oo, wouldn't
Right.
that just also show a different thing? And it's right, but I think we need to kind of go to both of them and just see what's easier and start tying what we're hearing to whatever sensations they're feeling, and whatever is easier to do it on is a good place to start. But yeah, is terrible for so many people because it turns over so much higher.
Right.
And like, at least for me, my instinct is yell, open my mouth, get loud.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty good
most
at it
people.
because I've practiced it a lot, but it's not
No.
easy.
You've learned how to kind of sneak through there.
Yeah.
And make it sound good.
Good in quotes.
Because you're thinning out just enough. Right. But I mean, like, you could get
Yeah.
away with that in so many songs, and you're not going to be hurting because you're just enough, like you're just a hair to the right.
But
of
if you do it for an hour, it's
acceptable,
exhausting.
Yes, it is.
And I see people, really good singers, do it just every once in a while, and then they're like, why am I so tired? I'm doing everything else really well. And it's like, yeah, because you're yelling for 30% of your thing, and even though it sounds really good, it's still it's that yell, and yelling is harder on the voice.
Well, and you get vocal fatigue
Exactly.
a lot faster.
Exactly.
Then you start slumping in other
So
places.
now if I apply the same rules that I was doing to the E and the oo, which says just don't get as loud.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, with most of us who try to get louder as we approach that middle part, you have to kind of do a diminuendo in order to just keep everything the same. Because the goal is really just the same until it turns over. It would be kind of a instead of the and you can hear it at that point, not the right? And as soon as you feel it turn over, then you have to do all of the things that you were doing instinctually right below, or else it'll start falling apart in head voice.
Right. Well, and I notice where your tongue is that you keep it kind of in that higher, more of an E position out of your throat. If it falls back in your throat, you start spreading.
But even
pulling.
recognizing
And
these
that's something,
rules,
yeah.
you can get away with it with those really back things as long as you keep it the same. It's harder for me. I like that brighter sound, but I know that Ken likes the slightly darker one. So like with the chiaroscuro whisper,
well, different
exactly. Just I'm a music theater rock pop guy, and he is less of that. So when we were talking about the whisper, he would tune an to more of a D versus me tuning it to an E. And it's just that teeny little vowel or tongue shift, but doing it on the D would be a and I get really bright at the top still, versus an E would be it just works a little bit better for me.
Okay, so you say when you tune it to those pitches, that means you're tuning it to turn over.
So that's actually
pitches?
tuning the second formant. So it's
I'm like, whoa, you jumped in.
Yeah. But what I like with that is it changes tongue positioning, and it just gives you a starting position that's pretty much the same tongue position, because that is what gives you the quality. And so jumping a little back with that E, tuning that to the B6 would be, versus a lot of people will go more of a, which is going almost up to the D. But the same sort of rules apply. If you want to keep the mouth closed once you find that tuning position until you feel it turn over, and then start opening your mouth, but keep the second formant tuning the same, which is why, like, if you open your mouth while you're doing the whisper, you can tell if you're keeping the second formant tuning the same. It's fun rules, but like, it really just means try not to change anything until you feel it turn over.
Just keep things the same. Just don't mess with it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is hard, because most people, as they approach that middle part, like, something internally shifts. It's not just something that you can see with the lips, And that's where I think that hootier sound is really helpful on an ooh, because if you're going ooh, ooh, at least keeps it a little more like that. And by doing the hootier sound, it lowers all of the formants, which helps decouple it. That's why those hootier sounds even work. So anyway, I've just been having a blast feeling like, oh, this is why all these exercises that everyone do work so successfully.
Right. That's so fascinating. It's so, I don't know. I just feel like voice is something you can study your whole life and you'll never get to the end of it. It's like, oh, I just learned something new today, or I learned why something that I already knew is what it is, or you know what I mean? And it's so fascinating. It's so fun to kind of dig a little bit deeper into those why behind the what, and helping our students, basically just remember kind of the things that we talked about. Try not to change anything. Get out of the way of yourself and just kind of and feel it. But then you as the voice teacher can take all that sciencey knowledge, and without them ever knowing, like, how much you're putting into it. I think that's really important to not overwhelm your students with too much science, as great as it is, but to help them just be like, just give them actionable steps that they can do. You use this. And when you know why it does what it does, it's really easy to just say, it just makes your teaching so much faster and so much better. And, then all of a sudden you have more students than you know what to do with. So that's a good problem.
Going to the get out of your own way thing. A few months ago or something like that, someone was working on my air conditioning, and he kept saying, you can't change physics. Like, it doesn't matter as much as we do in this place or this place. Like, the air's going to follow the path of least resistance and just go there. And this room is going to stay 1 billion degrees unless we do some other things with it. And I was like, oh yeah, it's the exact same idea with this. Like, you can't really change how the physics work, but we can, just knowing how those rules kind of work a little bit. And I really like tying it to the sensory idea of just what it feels like for that person, so that when you feel a thing, you just start doing whatever that next rule is to get the sound that you want. I like that because I can teach that to people so that they can go and just play around with those rules and experiment and not be like, why am I still flipping? Flipping is wrong. It's, I need to learn the rules of how to flip purposefully. Yeah.
Right. And calling it out every time they get it right. You did it. That's it. Repeat that feeling. I have found that makes such a difference for people, because otherwise they don't know
for sure
what they did.
I've been really trying to change the wording from right, though, to okay, you yelled there. Nice job. It's good to yell. We need to learn how to yell. Okay, awesome. You mixed there, or you flipped there, or whatever. And just kind of, because I think I got such a complex of doing things right or wrong that it feeds into this internal judgment cycle, and it makes it really hard to keep doing anything. But just being like, okay, these are all just sounds. That one is going to be really hard to do, but you can do it. Like, these are the rules of how to do it. It takes away that value. And I think makes singing more fun.
Well, yeah, because you're not always worried if you're right or wrong. And that's one of the most damaging things for singers, I think, is to worry if they're doing it right, because then they're thinking about technique. They're not thinking about singing songs, telling stories, communicating on a deeper level as humans. Rather, it's all about, did I mix there? Did I do it? Did I get that? Can I belt that note? Oh, that's wrong. And
it's getting out of your way, out of your
get
thoughts.
Them out of that.
And I'm really into basketball. And there's this player for the Jazz, Jordan Clarkson, and his number is 00. And he says that he has that number because it reminds him not to think, brain empty, 0 thoughts. And I'm like, okay, yeah, so that works. And just trusting your instinct. And with singing, it's the same sort of thing. And as someone who tends to get in my thoughts a lot, just recognizing, no, that's a thought. Maybe I don't need to think about that as much. Like, what's the sensation? Get back into my body has been really helpful for just trusting myself and staying forward, because it's way too common for me to sing something and be like, that's not it. And then suddenly I'm in the past. I'm not able to even do anything next. And it's all the same. How you do anything's how you do everything.
It's all the same. It's so true. So true. Like, yeah, we got to have
Yeah.
John Skidmore on here one of these days. I know he'll love to come on, but yeah, it's so much about that. And you find yourself talking to students, you don't have time to think about what happened 3 seconds ago. It doesn't matter. Like, you just got to keep going with what's happening now, because
Yep.
it's going to keep going, and yes, we can go back and try it again. It's not a big deal, but you got to think about what you're doing while
I try
you're
to
doing
be
it.
that voice in their head just externally until it kind of takes over for themselves. And it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Whatever. That's a judgment. I don't need to go into it. I
Yeah.
can just be like, okay, yeah, that happened.
That's good.
Whatever. I'm going to refocus on what's coming up next.
I love it. Well, this has been amazing, Sam. I have loved hearing you explain these things, because like what Ken was talking about a few weeks ago about just using the sounds to affect the voice rather than, kind of working at it from the other way around, and just giving them things that they already associate with a feeling to get the sounds that you want. And so it's really fun and fascinating to talk with you about getting, the deeper side of things, and really going over the what's and the whys, the formants and harmonics that most teachers are like, don't say those words. But they're just part of the rules. They're just part of how it works. And you don't have to know everything, but but the more you know about it, the easier teaching gets, and the easier it is to help people, which is what we're here to do. We're here to help
Absolutely.
people.
If you want to learn a little bit more of the in-depth nuts and bolts of everything, I highly suggest going and getting one of the past recordings of the IVTOM conferences, which you can get at ivtom.org/events.
Yes.
Some of the stuff we referenced today is happening in 2018, some of it in 2019. You can go to any of those, and you will probably hear someone who knows about 1,000 times more than I do talk about what I just tried to talk about.
Anyway, well, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope this was helpful and informative. Come visit us at ivtom.org. Come visit Sam at vocalese.net, or me at breakthrough-studios.com.
And like us on iTunes. Rate us on iTunes.
What else?
Yes. Subscribe, rate, all of those things.
Please.
Thank you for listening to the Voice Teacher Podcast, brought to you by IFTOM, International Voice Teachers of Mix. Your co-hosts are Sam Johnson and Aimee Geddes. Learn more about IFTOM at ivtom.org, and find Sam Johnson at vocalese.net and Aimee Geddes at breakthrough-studios.com. Voiceover and theme song by Maz Mazak, and this podcast is edited by Amber. You have been listening to
The Voice Teacher Podcast.